All right. What is up, everybody? So, after countless hours of tinkering, prototyping, making versions, putting them together, taking them apart again, we finally, Travis and I have the production version that's shipping, and I've got it all knolled out in front of me because I was taking pictures and inventory of everything and getting the little final baggies and packaging together. And I'm going to put it together right now. One, because I want to time myself. I want to test my own usage of my assembly guide. And yeah, it is the sealed one, Eddie. So you'll get to see what it looks like. And we'll see how this goes. So I kind of got my little snack. I got my bowl of cereal here. I have a little snack, a little nourishment before I get started. Got my stop motion here too, so I can kind of capture the whole process. Spent a long time just kind of reorganizing the office a bit, so I had some space to do this on assembly. And now I'm ready. Hey, Rover. Good morning. I'm gonna put my chat up on my phone so I can see it a little bit better. And we're gonna get underway here. It's alive. It's alive. Let's see. I don't get a notification on my own screen. That's strange. My channel. Gotta mute that. Don't need to hear myself. There we go. That'll work. All right, we are underway. Page 1, build materials, current version, 276 parts. Not bad for a box, huh? You can see I got a couple of them up on the wall here behind me. This was written over the course of a couple days. We'll see, it's always an interesting process going through my head of, you know, trying to write some from memory, come back, assemble, take some pictures, put it together. So much that goes into something like this, it's crazy. All right, so here are my tools. So decided we wanted to pack pretty much everything you would need to put it together with the kit. There's a couple of exceptions. It's definitely easier with a hobby knife and like a regular Phillips head screwdriver, but we're including like a little nut holder, nut driver thing. That's pretty cool. And then basically just a 2mm Allen key is all you need. I like my Bondus version of it, so I've got that as well, just to kind of help me along and see how that goes. So start by laying the bottom panel flat on your assembly surface with the finished side down and the 6 holes oriented towards you. All right, let's first move my cereal up a bit. So one of the really cool things that we ended up doing on the production version is we laser etched on the tabs the numbers of the panel and the tabs, so that somebody was a little bit less patient and wanted to get cooking right away can have a better chance at getting it right by just putting the tabs in the matching keyholes. So these are all going to be obscured by the final assembly. I'm not sure if that's going to show up well or not, but basically right next to the keyholes there's the corresponding holes that match up with each of the panels. So hopefully that helps. Alright, so I got my base panel here. And we start with it upside down. And you'll find out why in just a second. Well, in a little bit. Let's see here. We're going to get our steel reinforcing rod. We're going to get our L brackets. Why didn't we just change the distance apart so it could only go together one way? We played with that, and part of the reason, Eddie, is that when we were laying out the laser cuts and stuff, and we were flipping stuff around, originally when we were testing, we wanted it to mirror so that the finish side, it didn't matter which side the finish side was. Your suggestion is a good one, though. We may maneuver the tabs so that it could potentially only go together one way, but we figured what's the harm in labeling them as well. Yeah, people can't read. It's it's funny. So this finalized version of the box is, I think I've mentioned, far more complicated to assemble than the original. So we gained some sealing at the sake of assembly time, but I think the overall product is much more robust. And yes, Eddie, there's definitely things that probably would have been easier. The part of the fun of this process is you get into your own heads of, you know, how you go about doing something, and what's obvious to other people isn't necessarily what was obvious to you. So I'm sure there's all kinds of interesting things we probably missed. But the nice thing about having a laser cut product is that it's easy to make adjustments to it. Where is my bag of fasteners? Here's my bag of fasteners. After the fact, so we can iterate and make improvements, you know, as we're going. But for now, we have symmetry on a lot of our panels. That's probably partly my OCD liking things to be symmetrical. I know, Eddie. I know. We love your smart-assedness. Alright, so I'm just pressing a couple of square nuts into the nut traps on these L brackets. That's a stiff one. So all of these parts currently are ABS that I printed on my beloved Up Mini. I really love that printer because its tolerances are amazing. It's an ABS printing beast. These probably don't need to be ABS, but I had a lot of ABS that I wanted to use, and why not? Why not make it stronger when you can? Hey Chris, how's it going? Something tells me this is going to be a little bit more leisurely than normal, but that's how I roll. All right. So basically, we're starting with the base panel, and then we're gonna sandwich the vinyl pieces, starting at the base, and it's gonna form the exit plate and the faceplate component and hinges as we go. So we've got that, and then we need to lay on top the front track guide. So the way the vinyl pieces come together, this is 30 mil marine clear vinyl, and we made these cool steel laser cut templates that basically allowed us to sandwich the vinyl in between here, hit it really quick with a roller cutter, and then just drill through. I know that's not ultimately what we're going to do with it, but until I can get some vinyl cutting services lined up that have the ability to cut vinyl that's that thick, that works for now. Square pegs and round holes is the name of the game, Chris. Story of my life. Keep my fastener pile over here. So I've put together my fair share of these over the last couple months. There's definitely some tricks of the trade I've come across, but basically I'm trying to follow along right now with my own instructions to make sure they make sense, because I'm very good at not making sense or making sense in my own head. So base plate, track guide, and there's going to be a center track and a rear track here. So this is the bottom of the box, but we're going finish side down so it looks a little bit nicer when it's hanging on the wall. Okay, and the key to getting this thing to seal well is not tightening everything all the way right away. Ideally, you get it like just so it holds stuff in place, and then when we go about putting it on the side panels, it'll snug everything up nicely so that all the panels are flush. And that's important so that it doesn't leave gaps and stuff between the side panel and the base plate and whatnot. So all the fasteners on the kit are M3. I didn't want to have a bunch of different tools to put it together, so I intentionally designed it so that all you needed was they're actually M3 button heads instead of a socket head, so that means all you need is a 2mm Allen key, X key, however you want to say it. Alright, we'll put these other 20 mils aside. Unfortunately, there's a decent amount of different lengths, and I tried to be as consistent as possible so I didn't have as many different sizes, so I need the 16mm. But making everything the same length while, easier for finding the right pieces or the right fastener just didn't make it look as good. It made stuff hang over a lot more in different locations and whatnot. So I did as few as I possibly could. So what I'm assembling through right now is what we're calling the reinforcement bar. This was actually a late add after we were testing a couple prototypes and realizing that if you had big, heavy 5 kilo spools in there loaded down, that it could potentially create a little bit of sag in the middle. It wasn't really even that noticeable, mostly because the vinyl was like holding it to the exit plate on the front and whatnot, but I just felt a lot better about having just a little bit more reinforcement, and so we ended up getting this kind of steel U-channel. And so I've pressed in the 16mm screws from the bottom, and I'm just going to throw these nylocks on. And one of the cool things about going through the vinyl is that they kind of seal around the fastener as it goes through, and it helps hold it in place. Nope, nobody likes sag. Nobody likes sag. The original design had what was I want to say 3/4 inch dowel, as kind of these rods that went through. And I mentioned before we removed those because one, they allowed the spools to sit a little bit lower in the box and made it easier to load and unload the whole thing. And also, we didn't like the finish of it and the way that they looked. And doing woodworking on various components, definitely adds time to the whole process. I mean, obviously, there's time associated with any degree of assembly, but it's a lot easier for us to use laser cutting and other things to more efficiently produce stuff. So I'm not tightening these all the way, but I'm using my handy dandy little printed nut trap. I don't know what we would call it, a finger nut trap. So we got that, and then I'm just going to work my way up the vinyl plate here. So, yep, I got all that. We're on to the next page. Flip the base assembly over. We did that. We're not tightening just yet, so kind of get ahead of the game. Got a picture of all the different sizes on the assembly guide. Okay. All right. So like I said, we're going to work our way up the vinyl piece. And we're calling the part that has the holes that the pneumatic connectors sit in, we call it the exit plate. And let's see, we've got an inner and an outer exit plate. And we do this again so that we're sandwiching the vinyl in between, and so that we don't have any air gap between our joints to keep everything tight. And the inner exit plate is the one that has no tabs on its end. So this is the outer, this is the inner. The outer one, so the inner one is going on the bottom because we got this thing upside down. Place the exit plate underneath the vinyl. Finish side facing downwards, which I've done. Line that up. Line that up. Okay, and we get our M3 14mm. Yeah. No, we're not using any V-slot on this one. I know we talked about that. No sagging, you silly guy. So I like to start with just using the end ones. I just throw a nut on each so that I can more freely move it around without the whole thing falling apart. We got finish side up with the tabs on top. Here, flip it around. I'm recalling back when we were at Earth and I was putting together the original boxes, which almost seems so primitive now at this stage. But the one thing they did have going for them was they were way faster to put together. But I'd argue, I don't know what good that really does you if it's not sealing as well. And it just depends. If you're going for storage and stuff, maybe that's fine. But there's a lot about that too. The hinge and the bracketing and stuff like that were just not as refined as they are on this production version. So. It's time for a cereal intermission before my cereal gets too soggy. always nice to see your templates lining up and everything falling into place. It's a thing of beauty. Believe me, it took a little bit to get that just right, but we finally got there. Honestly, I don't think this many fasteners is necessary across the width of the whole thing, but probably better to have a little bit more than less. Plus, being a fan of symmetry, just seemed like it made sense to put a fastener in between each of the holes for the pneumatic connectors where the filament feeds out of. So the stock configuration is set up for five spools. It's got 9 holes in it, so you could put more in there of varying sizes depending on what you're looking for. Yes, the STLs will be available for the printed parts to people that, well, to basically anybody. I don't know that it'll do you much good if you don't have the kit. But yeah, absolutely, you can print your own if you want to do your own colors, or I really doubt you'll break anything. They're pretty small and pretty robust in their reinforcement. But hey, who knows? I guess if you throw the thing out a window or something, it's possible. Hey JT, welcome. Good to see people from across the pond. Not a luxury I usually get when I stream. Alright, now we're going to put the faceplate on. So the final version has a nice laser engraved RepBox on the face. That, and we got the backer to the faceplate, and it's got a little channel there for the strike plate, which the lock rests against. So I'm going to flip this over again and put that way and line up my holes. And line those up. So the parts that don't have tabs and stuff, there's really only one way that they line up. So I suppose theoretically you could install like the back on the front and whatnot, but there's visual indicators everywhere we could get them. Like you said, Eddie, people don't like to read, so doing the best I can to make it as intuitive as possible, but what's intuitive to me is not necessarily intuitive to others. Also, as the creator, like I said, I get in my own head a lot. And it's easy to just assume everybody's thinking the same thing that you are sometimes. I hope you don't throw it out the window. You know what I'd love to do actually is get one like fully siliconed up and then just throw it into a tub. See how it floats and keeps your filament nice and dry. Actually, that's probably not advisable. It's MDF, so it'll probably swell up. It is not designed to be waterproof. So sorry. Alright, face plates. Actually got out of the game with these rib nuts, but they should stay in place, I think, right now. Throw a guess in a way, kind of akin to an enclosure. If anybody's ever put together an enclosure for a printer, there's a good amount that goes into it, even though it's just kind of a box that goes around. I've got a lot of respect for David over Print Solid, who's designed a ton of enclosures that they sell for various printers. There's just so much that goes into developing something that's, like I said, even as simple seeming as a box. All right, got that, and got that, and I think I'm not gonna guess. So we're doing each side. Will it work as a flotation device? I would not trust it as a flotation device. I'll bet it would float for a bit. I have no idea. That sounds like it'd be pretty disappointing actually trying to float on it. Alright. So we developed some interesting techniques. I don't know if we developed them, but we utilized some interesting techniques. If you can see right here, the relief, the etch for the strike plate is basically, it's like routed with a laser. Like we can control the depth of the engrave to actually do some light routing. Which is what we did in the case of where the strike plate is going to go. So that it's really just held in place by one nut. And it can't rotate because it's sitting inside that little routed channel. No, I didn't give up on the printer belt. The printer belt is actually up in Portland with Tinkers right now. And we are waiting for Bill Steele to release his updates to Marlin for it, which I'm told are imminent. But the version that was released was just a little bit, hackish and stuff. And so anyway, I brought it up to Portland with me when I went on that trip, and I asked Keith if he would take it the rest of the way for me because I didn't have time to do that. So he's going to do that, and I'm hoping I can talk him into taking a road trip down here and hanging out in Cali and having him on the catch up and getting my printer belt back that way. He also got Joel's printer belt. Basically, Joel wanted no part of putting together the printer belt, and I don't blame him. It's there's like less than 0 instruction on it, and if you're not a fan of putting together a kit, then that is absolutely not the kit for you. Kind of missing parts and no real manual or anything like that. So these are the where the magnetic catches will grab onto the faceplate when it closes. Interesting thing about the faceplate, I don't know if it's interesting, but Travis and I, the faceplate was subject of a lot of debate in the beginning. So originally I said, well, why don't we just have the lid go all the way down to the exit plate? And Travis wasn't a fan of that. He just was worried the aesthetic wasn't going to look as good, and I think ultimately he was right. So it kind of adds like another mechanical element to it, but I think it kind of makes it feel better, and it folds open and easy to load in and unload filament. Thanks, Chris. Have a good night. Alright, so I'm going to put the rear track guide on and the rear brackets. It's easy because we don't sandwich any vinyl in there. So these corner brackets are kind of the back feet. And what I did, I buried one of them. This is what happens when you do stuff late at night. Put these back over here. Renol. Oh, there. So 16 millimeters for that. Eddie always cruising for that free stuff. Alright, so I'm going to press in some of these nylocks into this using my handy dandy pressing technique I showed off on Twitter a couple weeks back. Stick the nylock on upside down, thread it through the hole, press it till it snaps. That is such a nice fit. I love that fit. Nice tight fit. Snap. Okay. So this is the rear track. Rear track guide. Got 3 holes in it. Attach the corner brace. Like that. Same thing on the other side. I'll bet you are waiting. You and everybody else that wants me to send one. And I wish I could. Got a lot tied up in this right now, so see how sales go before I start doing more promo giveaways. So far we're gaining. Yeah, you tried to pay for the $17 spool of filament. So happy to see Paul. I don't know how to say his last name. Pustelkis. I don't know. He's the one that has done those Octoprint plugins, cancel object and whatnot. But he won one of the original, the OG RepBox. So I'm not tightening these all the way again. He won those at IRF. He won his at IRF. And he ended up on the wall feeding 3 different printers, I think. Theoretically, you could feed more, although it becomes more of an issue of routing the PTFE tube. Probably more on that later, but I've had good luck using those little cable. You know, like the cable installer, the satellite install guys, those cable management nuts. I don't know, whatever that they'll use to affix coax to the side of your house. Using those for routing the tube directly to your printer. So get seated all the way in there. It wasn't threading very well. There we go. We'll see. Hopefully I can get some shots of running these guys over. Unfortunately, all my printers are over there. My boxes are up here, mostly for display and storage at the moment. But once I get everything a little better set them to feed some printers. All right, so we got our back feed on. So what I like to do at this point is, this is actually the track. This is cool too. So the track guide, the center track guide. One of the reasons Eddie made it symmetrical was, depending on the configuration you wanted, you could actually install it so your markings, if you know you're generally going to use it for 5 spools, you keep the markings for the 5 spools forward. Now granted, this isn't a universal thing, but it's a kind of a guideline of like where you're going to place your rollers so that you know the standard width 5 kilogram spools fit in there. And then this is just kind of our layout for the half kilo spools that I sell. So anyway, just a fun little guide there. But your mileage will vary depending on what spools you're using. So anyway, what I was going to say though is, before that goes in there, when you're putting the rollers together, I find it nice to kind of work on them kind of vertically, because it is possible theoretically to, when you're putting them together, if they're canted a little bit, they won't slide well on the track. So if you basically assemble them here and butt them up against the edge of the track guide, you know you're going to get a nice flat, flush assembly. So grab my little bag of bushings and bolts for my track. So I'm just going to do one, I think, for right now. So these are a bunch of little bushings that made to fit in a standard 608 bearing, and it looks like that. Made these holes really tight. This was interesting too when I was doing the prints for this. Like getting the dimensional accuracy spot on for this was kind of important, because if there's any wobble in that hole, the bearing can kind of like move up and down, and it's not like critical, because you know obviously it's just so that a flange of a spool can spin on top of it. But when it's not nice and tight and snug, it just doesn't go together as easily and whatnot. So getting our holes measured just so, and getting the bushings just right and all that stuff was kind of a bigger consideration than we had originally had, or needed more consideration, should I say, than we originally gave it. Pallet plus 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 plus. Is that what they're going to call the new one? Yeah, Travis is using his right now to feed his pallet, and you know, once MMU2 comes out, I think it'll be perfect for that as well. Still on the list for that. I can't wait for that. Although I'll tell you, one of the things I'm a little bit bummed about. I use my Mark III all the time as kind of a go-to, and to potentially make it less reliable by adding the MMU2 on there, you know, makes me nervous just because there's so many more variables. But hopefully it's a lot more reliable than the original MMU was, and it'll operate well with or without it on. We shall see. Don't make the output. I didn't make the output nozzle slide. You talking about these guys? You want these to be able to slide back and forth in a track? Because we've talked about that. Oh, that's interesting. Doesn't press in quite enough. Yeah, Eddie, there was only so much we could get into this version before we said, okay, this thing's got to get out the door. We've been keeping our original pre-orders waiting for quite some time, and they're finally getting their shipments out this week. You know, anytime you start producing something, I think you come across all kinds of things that you probably don't consider. So It's actually did pretty well. What I was saying is that, like, I try to snug this up in here before I tighten everything up. But honestly, we've got these holes dialed in so well now that these are pretty flush. So let's see if this is give you a sense. You know, it's not super fluid, but it slides, and it's not like you probably going to be maneuvering them. They pop in and out easily, so they're designed to line up with these guides. So probably easier just to pick them up than to try to slide them in the track. It will hold, Rover, it'll hold 9 of the half kilo max currently. So that's this size. I suppose, I don't know, I haven't seen anything really narrower than that. I suppose it's possible, theoretically, that if you had like super narrow spools, you could put more in there, but 9 pretty much fills up the entire thing. Part of the reason we went to this kind of double track style is it allowed us to fit more, rather than have each individual track butting up against each other and creating more space between the spools. It allowed us to put the spools closer together. The 5 setup is for the full kilos, so it'll hold 5 full kilos with a little bit of room on the ends, actually. Okay, so anyway, you get a sense of what the rollers assembly is like. I'm not going to do all the rollers right now. I'd rather just get this box together. But we're looking good, so we don't need that just yet. Alright, now we're going to put the back panel on. So this is where it starts to get a little bit, well, we get the back panel on, and then it gets a little bit different when we get to the side panels, depending on what kit you have. For the sealed versus the non-sealed version. Just note to self, I've got to put page numbers on these. You can tell by the numbering and stuff, but this came apart. Also, this will probably be stapled, or I don't know. I'm hesitant to want to do a printed version with it because, you know, people can just print out their own or follow online, but I was advised, I was given the advice to make sure you included a printed copy just because people don't want to have to deal with that. I don't know, I'm still on the fence about it. 5 big spools, 5 kilo spools, so it'll hold 5, let's see here, I don't know if you can see, like, this one's got a mix, but say this one's got, yeah, wrong way. So these are what I'm calling standard size. And that's basically double the traverse of the ones I was just showing you. Hello. Make sure I got that lined up again, right? A lot of people trying to steal your credit card data, Eddie. Giant bowl of cereal break. Realign my roller tables. Just looking at the GoPro. Pardon me. Yeah, the feedback we keep getting, a lot of people are surprised actually at how compact they are. When people see it in person, they're like, wow, the thing's a lot smaller than I thought it would be. And yet it still holds 5 kilos. And it holds 5 kilos firmly. So, put the back panel on. B5, B6. So you could put it on finish side backwards, but I was just checking to see that the tabs line up, and they do not. So I'm gonna make a note. See, Eddie, this is where your suggestion comes in, that if we offset these so they can only go together one way. But anyway, finish side forward so it looks a little bit nicer inside the box. And then I grab my 12 mils, which I have right in front of me where I had them combined in here. So Eddie, you just want to click buy and go, so does that mean you prefer using sites that just take PayPal, or someplace where you already kind of trust that you've got your info, your credit card info stored somewhere and it's not going to get stolen? Again, we're not snugging that down completely, just enough to hold it in place. And that one I need to get my lock on the back side of. Oops. Should have seen that in the first place. Wasn't paying attention. Rover builds good websites, trustworthy websites. It's good to hear. Although, to be honest, pretty much everybody's using the same credit card processing. Well, not the same. There's a ton of different ones out there, but I guess it's the implementation of their card processor that you really got to be mindful of, and whether or not they're using encryption and all that good stuff too. Huh. Alright, so no, we'll flip engraved. Yeah, interestingly enough, I use Braintree for my card processor, and the implementation for just PayPal was a little bit buggy, so I don't have it on yet, but ultimately it'll have PayPal and a bunch of other stuff too, Venmo, Amazon, whatever you like, Apple Pay. Alright. Now we set this aside. Aside, I mean down there. We're going to work on the lid. So we're going to grab the top panel and our top hinge and our lid clamp and our top clamp. So basically we're going to be going like this, and then the top clamp actually goes underneath. So I'm going to do the top first and then the lid. So on the top, we're not doing the end screws just yet because the corner brackets go in there and they're a little bit special. Those 12s over here and grab my 14s again. If I can find where I put them. Right in front of me. So, 1, 2, posts sticking up. Vinyl over top of that, like so. Clamping bar on top of that. Get some nylocks. Not tightening fully yet. Bring this a little bit closer. I know the camera angle isn't super close for this, but hopefully that'll give everybody the idea. Okay. And flip her over. Let's see here. So, time to take the paper off the acrylic. So what I like to do is just tear off only what I need to have removed for the time being as I'm assembling stuff, so that I have a way to grab it without smudging and scratching it as much. But you can pull the whole thing off if you want. Same thing on the other side. Something that's so satisfying about pulling the paper backing off of the acrylic. Might not look pretty right now, but I don't care about that. What I care about is not scratching up our lid any sooner than we have to. So acrylic loves to scratch. Just the fact of life. Check out that sweet flame engrave we've got on that lid clamp. Alright, so the lid clamp goes on top like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to get my 14 mils here. Yeah, I know it. It comes with everything in that picture. Which is basically the gaskets and the bars for clamping the whole thing in there, and the strike plate and the latch kit. And I will add that to the description on the website, because I know I've been doing everything so hurriedly that I am missing critical details. Alright, so flipping it back over, threading that through the vinyl, just like that. This is symmetrical, so it doesn't matter if you put it on one way or another. You know, Eddie, and now that I'm thinking about it, I think the reason we did symmetrical is for a lot of these things that didn't have tabs, I didn't want people to have to worry if they had it aligned one way or the other. And so for something like this, or the clamp plates and stuff like that, it doesn't really matter if there's symmetry, but you're absolutely right. For things like with the tabs, like, it's probably a good idea to key them just slightly differently so people will stop if they're doing it wrong. Maybe a 1.1 upgrade. Yeah, the sealing kit is subtle but significant. Basically, the non-sealed version, like I said, it's pretty good. It's pretty good to begin with, but you know, having those gaskets and that latch kit to really clamp the lid on and hold it tight against the gaskets is really what makes all the difference. I suppose if you're really hardcore, you could get in there and silicone all the joints, but I don't know. Alright, so there's my lid. I feel like I need to develop some sort of testing thing like I have at IKEA that just does this like 5,000 times. See how well that final holds up. Alright. Let's look back at the assembly guide, shall we? So we did that. Alright. Time to start working on the side panels. Getting there, huh? Well, this is where I stopped having pictures. I wonder it's this view here. So I have to take a couple more pictures and add them. Okay. Alright, so what we do now. Good. Counted right on that. Move all that there. Grab our little base assembly again. Stand everything up like this. And put it on as if it had side panels, but it doesn't. Snug, like that. Everything tight fits. Nice. All right. So you can see that's kind of taking shape there. And we grab the side panel. I'm just going to put this over here for now, while we work on this and do the ceiling bars. So we need our gaskets and our ceiling bars, as we like to call them. Just make up funny names for things, because we can. Hey, Hawk! What's up, Ben? Welcome. So, Eddie, you can certainly caulk the insides, but the basically the biggest air gaps are right around where the lid closes, so you're not going to have any of the ceiling here. So, you know, the flap lays over and whatnot, and you can certainly do your own whatever you like. But the part of the delay in getting everything right was getting the angle of the lid closure just right, so that it kept pressure on the seals when it was closed. Was a finicky adjustment. All right, so this is a little bit funny, but it's effective. So I'm going to start with the left side bracket. So you'll see there's a little groove that we laser routed into the wood, and then on the 3D printed part we have a groove here too. You'll have that piece if you have a standard kit or a ceiling kit, but you only utilize the groove if you have the gaskets. Start by peeling the backing off of this. Grab my scissors. Scissors over here. Stand by. Stand by while I grab my scissors. Put that on there. Peel off the backing where I need it. I'd like to try to make that European hangout. It'd be nice to get on with a bunch of people I don't normally get to interact with. I'll have to look at the timing again, because it probably puts me in the same situation, you know, you're in with my streams usually, like in the middle of the night, right? Alright, so I'm cutting that off right there. So because of the faceplate folding in and the lid folding on top, we've got basically 2 tiers of sealing that has to happen, which is why it's kind of staggered like this. It'll make more sense once it's in there. Anyway, press that in there, and then I gotta cut notches for where the little holes that hold the magnetic latch, so those clear. So I put these on, and for now, let's trim that just a hair. I'm leaving everything long because if you want the thing to seal nice and tight, if you're nitpicky about, you know, every little piece being sealed, it's better to leave them a little bit too long, and then once it closes up and stuff, you get in there and trim it to length so that everything is seated nice and snug together. So basically this is going on my side panel like such, and we're going to bolt it on in just a second. But before I do that, I'm going to trim the top and the bottom piece along that angle. For this, I'm going to use my roller cutter. But this is where you're going to need a hobby knife or some scissors or something like that. I just happen to like this roller cutter because it gets a nice, smooth, even cut. I do not expect everybody to have one, but if you did, it's a good tool. You can get the same effect basically with a razor. Now we check all these, all those. All right, so that's the bottom part, and then there's a cover for basically that, and we did that because we want to double the thickness so that when this is compressed, it's got something behind it, and creating a nice snug seal. So with the side panels, because we have steel side panels, the finished side goes inside the box, so it looks a little bit cleaner. That's one of the advantages of using those side panels, in addition to adding rigidity. So we're going to take our rib nuts and put them in these holes here. What's the timing again? Let's see, 7 a.m. Let's see, 12 noon Pacific. Oh, that's not a big deal. That's awesome. Yeah, definitely want to try to be in there. So wait, so Ben, you're saying it's at noon Pacific? Or 7 a.m.? I'm not sure what you guys are saying right now for the timing. What is it in Pacific Daylight Time? That is what I need to know. Right, so before I put the cover on, get those holes lined up. There. Those on top. And then need one more rib nut right here. Press this into the 3D printed fitting corner brace. So we put our M16. This is where I did not count correctly, I think. 1, 2, 3, so I'm 6 shy. I'll make a note of that on my bill of materials. I have the sealing kit, I need more 16mm screws. Plus 6. 1, 2, 3 on each side. Should get 14 total on that. So that puts us at 282 total parts. Woohoo! All right. Hopefully, you happen to have a ton of every type of screw you could ever possibly want. I'm not going to do those just yet because we need to put our mag latch on there. Yeah, 8 hours difference, so 12 noon. Well, noon is easy. I can do noon. All right, so now I got my magnets. Hold the faceplate on. And you thought it was just a box. Wait, we got all this awesome stuff here. So I like that these are all adjustable because we want to get that seal just right. And so, having the ability to slide that magnet back and forth to where it needs to go, and we don't necessarily want to tighten that all the way just yet. What I do is I'll leave it a little bit loose here, then when I get the whole thing together, I close the latch, let the magnet pull it to where it needs to be, and kind of tighten it from the inside so I know it's snugged up. Alright, so the nice thing is there's the adhesive on the back of this, but really what's holding it in place well is the fact that it's being clamped against the side panel in multiple places. This hole right here is actually the post where the lid stay will go. We're not putting that on just yet because we have to wait until we have the side panel on for that. So we're going to do the same thing we did here on the other side. So if you didn't get the seal kit, it's only a little bit different in the faceplate is different, and then you don't have the sealing bars and the gaskets. There's just basically some standoffs for the lid stay, so that basically everything is the same distance regardless of what version you have. And then there's just like a little standoff for the magnet down here, and then up here is the corner bracket. But then you've got nothing to seal against on the side here when the lid's closed. Dun, 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 dun. All right. So these holes aren't quite as snug, so sometimes those will fall out as I'm laying the panel down. So if I just put a little bit of friction against them, oops, get that one just right. They'll just stay so they don't fall until they're packed. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's true. That and so goes. Don't do this anymore. And we're going to repeat on this side. Just tweet out. Why don't you tweet out the link, Ben? This is the right side because there's a big R on it. Let's begin with the labeling, trying to give a good indication of which is which side. Thankfully, the design of most of the other 3D printed parts, they're all symmetrical, so it doesn't matter which side is which is which. But for these little trapezoidal corner brackets, it does matter. So again, I leave this a little bit long so that I can get the seal against the faceplate nice and snug when the time comes. Now I'm just going to kind of cut away what I don't, what's in my way to put the bottom part of the seal on. And get that snugged up in there. So everything should fit nicely in the little routed groove. And I take it off again, and it kind of gives me a little visual of where the holes were so that I can kind of trim those out so that the rib nuts can poke through. So I have something to screw my magnet catch to. And it really doesn't matter if the adhesive gets a little bit of that wood on it, because like I said, it's the clamping against the faceplate that's really holding that snug in place. Those aren't going to pull out on you. It's not like they're under any kind of friction or force, really. Lock the wheels on this thing. Yeah, roll. Should have done that a while ago. Make sure you don't cut a digit off. Show? Let's see. There you go. Huh. Alright, lays on there like that. Top plate goes on there. A little bit of charring there. So the laser, when it's cutting some of these, sometimes leaves a little bit of residue that you can just wipe off with a rag or a little Windex. Comes right off. Probably not even Windex, probably use water. So on the whiteboard version of the material, the charring, there's something about the finish on the whiteboard that it like almost like melts a little bit, and like I said, it'll wipe off, but you gotta get a little bit aggressive with it. And it just takes us way too much time to like wipe every one of them down before we're shipping them. So I just don't like the way they look, you know, being sent that way. But the labor is just way too intensive. So I don't know. We're debating just like 95% of the orders are for black anyway. We're debating just not offering the white version. Just doing an acrylic and a black version for now. So we'll see. Alright, so side panels together. Alright, we're moving at a little bit of a faster clip now. These are loose enough so I can adjust this in a second. Okay. Now you may remember, let's start with this one. And I'm going to grab my top and bottom assemblies. And I'm just going to lay them into their keyholes. Okay. Okay, that's nice and snug. That's nice and snug. So Eddie, at this point, if you were really wanting to, or anybody else that was really wanting to, it's real easy. You just run a bead of silicone. So you can see the guides on either side, but I think I'm going to leave the 9-spool configuration forward, because I like to load it up with my rainbow pack. And then we take our top panel, or right side panel, I guess, technically. And this one we're just going to watch keys, get them all lined up. probably the hardest. I don't know if it's hard. Trickiest part, I don't know. Just getting all the pegs lined up. They're snug by design. There we go. That's on there. All right. And now we get our metal side panel. A little carbon fiber on this one, although I think we have like 18 or 19 different designs to choose from now. And I'll grab my 12mm screws. So remember how I said don't tighten up anything fully just yet? That is sorry. Looking for, remember I put my handle in with the 12mm. Okay, so here's all my 12mm screws. Anyway, I was saying is, when you tighten the side panels on, it allows everything to kind of compress and snug together, so that if you had a little bit of shift in your pieces that were sandwiched together, it'll pull them flush, and then we'll go back and tighten everything up. There we go. That needs a cross threading. Seat the nut in the trap. There we go. I'm gonna get that lined up. Just a finger, my fat fingers. Much better. Gotta tighten that fully yet, just because that shift in the hole. Get up here in the top corner. So this is fastening against the little trapezoidal. Forgot to put the rib nut in that one. Done this so many times and yet I still forget to do stuff sometimes. No biggie though, that's easily pressed in underneath. Okay. And then we'll do the back on the corner brace. That one I already pressed in the nylock. Alright. Now holding on to the other one because it's not fastened yet, flip her over. The other one on. batch of bushings. This tasty batch right here. Ooh, delish. That is 41 bushings. The exact amount you need for one RepBox. Surprisingly, I know somewhere somebody manufactures one or somebody makes some that are already like injection molded, but I have yet to find them for a 3mm. I found 4mm. So for right now I'm printing my own, but I'm hopeful that I can find just some off-the-shelf ones so I don't have to just keep printing little silly bushings for the roller bearings. I think this is why we don't tighten this fully, because the holes are so tight that the plate can shift enough where it cross threads up here. This hole is so tight it's actually kind of threading into the side panel there. You need to tweak that. Make that hole just a little bit bigger. There we go. A good idea to make sure the hole lines up before I start tightening, so it grabs. There we go. Grab onto the rib nut. Alright. So we'll do the cleat in just a second. Got to do our lid stays still. Before I do that, I think I'm going to snug up all these things that were still loose. And we'll put the seal for the faceplate on there. See you guys. Just leave that hanging over a little bit so I can trim it. Alright, just the faceplate seal. So this is where this is still a little bit long. And that was intentional so that I could get the faceplate to seal just right. Trim that in a second. Put the latch kit. Last to the 16mm. Press it in there. interesting. Doesn't look like this hole drilled quite all the way through. That. Have to make sure we double check this. I just made myself a note that hole just didn't quite bore all the way through. So I don't know if we have the power setting wrong on the laser for this particular cut, or if it's something we need to check for the other one. But we will. But right now, just give a little punch. This will not be necessary on yours. So, it's the strike plate right here. That's a little knob that the latch grabs onto. So we have this all closed up. So that's right. Okay. I'll start tightening stuff here. Prints are done. Good to know. Nice and tight. And now we need our 20 millimeters that we left. Down this way. So these are what thread into the top, and you know what? Get my haste, I did not put the square nuts in. I've got 2 more square nuts that'll press into the trapezoidal base. Making sure the nut trap is cleaned out so I can press this in. Would have been a lot easier to press in when it was not installed, but still should be able to get that in there. Hopefully without using those pliers. Put it down again. There we go. It's pressed in. The other side while we're at it. That's why I need that grease on there. Square nut, square hole. And we're pressed in. Alright. Now we can do this. Show that ground, that's nice. Bolting down to the trapezoidal brace, trapezoidal bracket, however you want to call it. It's looking nice and snug, feels good. Can't come up, can't come out, good. Okay. Do the lid stays next so that we can have this stay up so when I'm trimming things it'll stay up out of the way. Before we do that, let's take it back. Do the cleat. So these will be pre-drilled on the production one, but the one I just grabbed hadn't been drilled yet. If you have an impact gun, handy, not necessary, works with a regular screwdriver. Back corner together nicely, and let's just add some rigidity to it so when it's hanging on the wall it's nice. This tiny little lath screws. Two more of the black lath screws. And two. Make sure the whole thing is locked to it nice and tight so it's solid on the wall. Okay, we are looking good. Tighten up some of these. So we're tightening these. They should be just tight enough so that the bolt is going right through the top of the nylon. And it's important, especially on the acrylic, you don't over tighten so you don't crack the acrylic. But it's pretty forgiving, but still better. It doesn't need to be completely crushing. Just snug enough so it's pinching from the clamp to the clamping bar and give a good seal around that nylon. Okay. Alright, trim. Trimming the gasket that was overhanging so that the faceplate is nice and flush with the bottom of the side gasket. It's a little bit long. It's better to just take too little off than too much. Again, this is probably nitpicky, but get a nice good seal like I do. You want to get just right. Again, get in there with a hobby knife. Can't see, but this is creating a nice sealing area here. So when this is closed, it's pressing firm against all of it. Very nice. Very nice. Okay. Now we're going to do the lid stays. So for the lid stays, grab our baggie that says lid stay. So the left side one will be held together with rivets everywhere. The right side one you're going to assemble, and I pre-assembled this one, but you're going to basically assemble the bracket onto here with a 10mm screw and a nylock. The reason for that is because these particular lid stays only came in a right-hand configuration, and I wanted them on both sides so that it held the lid up nice and evenly, and so we had to kind of fabricate our own for now. Hopefully, moving forward, we will actually fabricate our own. Okay, so we're going to take our 10mm button heads, set these 12 on the sides so we don't mix them up. And we're going to attach so that the part that bends and sits in the channel is facing into the box. And we're going to take our 22mm, which there is one extra of in our roller baggie. And that's going to slide all the way through. A hole in the side panel and in the ceiling bar. These are particularly snug, so you probably have to thread it through, but we didn't want that post wobbling, so it makes the lid stay nice and sturdy when it's open. And we take a washer. Put a washer on the posts. Put our lid stay. Hold that in place and grab another washer. Basically sandwiching the lid stay between two washers, and then we get a nylock. And this nylock is critical. The tighter you have this one, the better the lid stay, the more friction against the lid stay, and the better it operates. So if the lid stays aren't staying up on you, if you tighten these, it will make it function better. So that one's good. We do the same thing on the other side. It's a little different when we get to the attaching. So on this one, when you assemble it, the nylock is going to be facing the center of the box. 10mm. Nylock. Spin this thing off easier. Yeah. Hey, Pop. Yep, I'm up late. I am putting together one of the RepBoxes that I made for holding filament. Got a couple of them up on the wall. Putting together one of those. Nope, I'm just doing a little video on how to assemble it. I sell these on my website. So, This particular one I'm just doing as a test against my assembly guide to make sure I need to make any adjustments. I'm kind of writing down some notes as I go. And for now, we're not selling them pre-assembled, but if we can figure out how to get assembly done efficiently, maybe we will. I don't know. Takes about an hour to put one together. There's a decent amount of steps involved, but this is the price we pay for airtight filament. You want me to send you this one, Eddie? This is the one you want? Alright, 25 mil. The other post. So this one, we got to put a little bit of a standoff on because of the right hand configuration being kind of a piece together. So basically we're using 25 millimeter button head, and one of our bushings is basically a spacer. Alright, so we got our spacer, and we got that washer on there, and then we're going to cap it off with a nylock. And again, we put enough tension on that, so look at that. That's sitting nice and flush. And when we put the latch on there, it'll hold it tight. So, depending on what version you have, if you have, we kind of made this this little handle so that if you have the latch kit, it goes horizontally like this, and then the latch goes beneath. And if you don't have the sealing in the latch kit, just lays across like that, and you got a little handle right there. So modular. You like modular. And you don't like either of those options, you can print your own. So, time to take off the rest of the paper. Kit on. There's only one way for that to fit in there. It's keyed in. Turn it on the back, hold it on there. Take that screw off. latch. So the latch, the hook goes facing outward at the top of the box. Or should I say facing maybe the bottom of the lid, I guess. So this is where Phillips screwdriver comes in handy. I'm gonna cheat here and use this real quick. Nice and snug. Okay. Close it up, make sure it works. Got the key in all the way. Yeah. Got it rotated. That's critical stuff I should mention. You start with the key horizontal, so when you lock it, it locks downward and stays open. Thankfully, this is easily adjustable. That's what we want. There we go. All right, take two. Perfect. That is a very tight latch. And I want to see, it's pressed nicely up against all those seals. Nice and tight. Got a couple finger smudges on there. That's good. And now it's just finishing touches. Handle. We'll put the pneumatic connectors in. So for a 5, it's just every other hole. You can start at the center if you want. If you need more of these, they're going to be available on the site. You can buy more Bowden tube, PTFE tube, more connectors, more rollers. These are pretty tight holes. You can finger tighten them most of the way, but I like to use use my pliers. Use some pliers to get it all the way. Or you can use a spanner, crescent wrench, you know, socket if you've got one that'll fit over these. Do with my pliers, better pliers. No, doesn't matter. In the backing plate. I'll get off of this. stealing a little backup piece because it didn't print it on this one, apparently. Alright. That is that. There she is. Everything's snugged up. So I can see the seals are all compressing, which is good. That's good, not seeing any gaps. Alright. Well, I'm going to finish putting together some rollers and then I'm going to call it a night. Alright. Hope everybody out there had a good time. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to end the stream now, and I will talk to everybody another time. Maybe I'll do a separate video on the wall mount. It's pretty straightforward. Hang a French fleet, hang the whole thing all in the box, and ta-da. All right. Have a good night, everybody.